Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are delighted to welcome Sanjay Kumar, Union Secretary, Department of School Education and Literacy, and he will be speaking on the schools of tomorrow. Let's give him a very, very warm round of applause. I was just chatting with Sanjay ji outside. I said, all these years that I knew you, I never asked you which school or university you went to. And he said he's a Delhi product largely, having studied earlier in Mussoorie, then went to DPS Noida, or where was it? DPS Mathura Road, St. Stephen's College, and then decided he wanted to do a PhD in physics. Went to New York University, and again changed his mind, and he said, let's come back. I think he got selected for the civil services, and has been an IAS officer from the Bihar cadre. But most importantly, he is now the senior-most civil servant steering the implementation of the National Education Policy 2020 in schools. And he has been really the center of a large amount of reforms around foundational literacy and speaks very candidly about it, numeracy, curriculum redesign, assessment reform, and teacher capacity building, all so relevant to our conclave today. So, Sanjay ji, we will explore these various reforms that you've introduced and the whole business of being future ready in schools. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome once more Sanjay Kumar.
Thank you, Raji. It's always a pleasure to be here with the India Today, and we look forward to this education conclave on a yearly basis, which you do. You know, education is the heart of everything. We keep talking about lifelong learning, and the way the world is changing, where skilling, reskilling, and upskilling is so important, it is going to be enabled by the kind of education we've had. The National Education Policy of 2020 is the first education policy of the 21st century. The previous one came in the year 1986. And it captures the kind of changes which are taking place. First of all, it changed the pedagogical structure of the school education system. Now we have a 5+3+3+4 system, 15 years of education. And in this 15 years of education, I'm going to speak a little on the first 5 years, which we call foundational literacy and numeracy. So it basically comprises of 3 years of pre-primary classes and classes 1 and 2. So you begin at the age of 3, and research and everything shows that ECCE, that is the age group between 0 to 8 years, is perhaps the most important phase in the evolution of any one of us. This is a time when the brain is developing, and you must learn a language proficiently in this age and also be comfortable with numerical knowledge. You know, we've always had pre-primary classes even in the past. Many of you would have gone to LKG, UKG, and those kind of things. But for the first time, it's become part of a national policy. And this is why it is important. The other point I would want to highlight is the fact that the NEP very clearly says that foundational literacy and numeracy, that is the beginning of your education, should be in your local language, the mother tongue we say. You learn best in your mother tongue. Your cognition also develops best when you understand in a language which you are familiar with. And I think this poses a bit of a challenge for us because many of us think that learning in English is better. We have a fascination for English. No doubt English is an international language, but the fact is that what do you do when you go to a class and somebody is speaking a language to which you're not familiar with? Are you going to understand things the way you would do when you are learning in your mother tongue? I'm just going to leave a question behind for you. Would we want to learn English as a medium of instruction, or would we want to learn English as a subject? Many of us have learned English as a subject, and yet we have equal proficiency in it. So So that is the larger question I want to leave behind you. English is important, and the NEP says so, but it also says that you must begin in your mother tongue. It also goes on to say that multilingualism is extremely important, because only when you know more than one languages, then you realize how important it is to add to your cognition. And India is a multilingual country. We have 22 languages in our Schedule 8, which we call the Bharatiya Bhasha. English is the 23rd one. So important to learn language because it is rooted to our culture, the way we understand the world, and it's part of the ecosystem. You know, we've done well in early part of education, I would say. If I were to look at the presence of students in school till class 8, the GER is almost 93, 94%. We're still missing out on 6 or 7% of the children, but by and large, everyone is in school till class 8. The problem is happening when we are going to 9, 10th, 11th, 12th. I mean, I would give you a figure that out of every 100 children who are joining class 1, 62 of them are reaching class 12th. So we are losing out 38 children on the way, and this is a challenge for us. That what do I do so as to ensure that every child who joins the school goes up till class 12th? There are quite a few things which can be done. One is we need to create additional capacity at the level of secondary education. We need more schools. We need more integrated schools, because we find that parents and students both show a preference for schools which are integrated schools. If a child goes to a school which is up till class 12th, there is huge probability that he would finish 12th. But then what the problem is that when you have to change schools. After 5, you change a school. After 8, you change a school. So during this transition, we are losing out children. And if I were to ask myself and tell you that where are we losing children? We are losing children from 5 to 6 transition because the geography is changing. 8 to 9 when the geography is changing. So integrated schools are a must. And I think we are making amendments in our Samagra Shiksha, which is the flagship policy, centrally sponsored scheme of Government of India, so as to pay more attention, put in more resources at secondary schools so as to do that. The third point I would want to highlight is that we are not doing skilling adequately. You know, somehow we are a little shy of working with hands. And this is a mindset which must go away. The National Education Policy says that skilling must be brought in, and we have brought in at class 6. So in 6, 7, and 8, you learn to do skilling, you get experienced with it, and 9, 10th, 11th, 12th, you actually do skilling, and you get credit in it, you get marks in it. We must ensure that every child who finishes class 12th gets out of class 12th with competency in at least one skill. I would love to give you an example. You see, on an average, we have 2 crore children per class. And the NEP 2020 says that by 2030, everyone should do class 12th. Means 2 crore children will pass out of class 12th. The NEP also says that by 2035, the GR for higher education should be 50. Meaning 1 crore of them would go into higher education. Where are the other 1 crore going to go? They are going to join the labor force. They would become entrepreneurs. They would begin something, but they require competency for it. And this is why skilling is important. I think we learn to look at countries like South Korea. We learn to look at countries like the OECD countries, where in spite of the fact that they are very affluent, their children are doing skilling in schools. And this is one message for us. The fourth point I would want to highlight, Raji, is that our assessment patterns must change. You know, we often say that we are learning by rote, and that is what is encouraged because that is the way we are tested. And what you learn, how you learn, the way you learn to a very large extent is dependent on the way you are assessed. A challenge in the country for us is that we have multiple boards. We have 66 school boards in the country. And out of this 66 school boards, 34, 35 of them, about 95% of the children. So we are working with all the state school boards so as to create an equivalence in curriculum. We must follow similar kind of curriculum. It makes no sense to have different curriculum, let's say in science, whether you're in Assam or whether you're in Orissa, Bihar, or Tamil Nadu and Kerala. We must study similar things. So assessment equivalence and curriculum equivalence is something which we need to do. We are doing it through a body which we call Parak. It is housed in the NCERT. Parak also does a national achievement survey. We call the Parak Rashtriya Sarvekshan. We did it for 2024, and I'm very happy to say that we saw very good outcomes for Nipun Bharat Mission, that is foundational literacy and numeracy. For the first time, we saw not an incremental change, but a substantial change in learning outcomes for classes 3. More heartening, rural children did better, and government schools did better than the private schools. But the challenge is in classes 6 and 9. In classes in 6 and 9, we have lost that advantage. The private schools are doing better. And the more worrisome part is that as we are climbing up from classes 3 to 6 to 9, the cumulative scores for learning outcomes are falling. And that's a major challenge for us, that yes, we have children in school, but I think in the next 5 years, we must be concentrating primarily on the fact that learning outcomes should be there in a joyful manner, in a manner in which children's mental health is taken care of. And the last point I would want to say before I give the mic to you is that technology has to be leveraged to the hilt. We must leverage technology, but then with a bit of a caution. And I think world over, we are seeing a kind of a pushback which is happening because of excessive use of the social media platform. And I think the flavor of the season is artificial intelligence. Everyone is talking about it. But then people are also talking about the fact that it may lead to cognitive offloading. You must exercise your mind. And artificial intelligence, once you're a little mature, then you can use it. But if you use artificial intelligence perhaps for developing before you are cognitively mature, it may harm you. I think this time I was watching the World Economic Forum debates, and I found that almost 80% of the debate was on artificial intelligence as to how it is coming and how it is going to impact us. But I think I have a message for myself and also for all of us, that I think balance in life is extremely important. Buddha always preached the middle path. The middle path always is a good path. Balance between 1 and 2 is always very important. But I'm very hopeful because if you look at last 200 years, any technology which has come into the society, it has created anxiety. But at the end of it, humankind has been better off. We are living better, our quality of life has become better, and I see no reason why artificial intelligence will be any different. It is managing the transition period which is important.
Let's give Sanjay Kumar a very, very warm round of applause for that succinct enunciation of the policy. Clearly, our policy is in good hands, but let's take a couple of questions on what you had talked about. And let's look at this whole issue of enrollment, where you say that enrollment doesn't seem any longer a problem, except as you get to secondary level and get to higher education. That's the big thing. But you've also mentioned in other places, if enrollment is not as important now, learning is. And the NEP was meant to transform the way we are imparting pedagogy. How much of that learning has the system internalized? Where would you see are the challenges in this particular aspect?
I would say that enrollment is important because only if you're in a school, then you will learn.
Right.
So that is a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient condition.
Yeah.
You may be in a school, and yet you may not learn adequately. So I think we need to concentrate on the classroom transaction. And the classroom transaction will come about by a teacher, because the teacher is the most important person. We need to invest more in our teachers, build their competencies, make sure that they are motivated, and use technology as to lessen the burden on the teacher. Can we use artificial intelligence for creating lesson plans? Can artificial intelligence help the teacher in making assessment? These are the kind of things we should be worrying about, and we are worrying about. And again, I would want to reiterate, skilling is important. If you look at the India Skill Report, it says that only 54% of Indians are employable. It has increased in the last 10 years, I would say, but it needs to increase more. We need to be more employable, and that is going to come only with competencies. You know, I often hear the Honorable Prime Minister speak, and he often says that degrees and diplomas are important, but equally important are the competencies which must come with it.
Very well put. Yeah, and taking on skilling, I'll come back to teaching the teachers that you mentioned, but let's take skilling. You have this new system that's been introduced since 2021-22. You have, as you mentioned, 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. And that 4, the last 4 was meant to do a lot, possibly with what we called in the old ways vocational, now the new word skilling, because vocational had become almost like a derogatory word for people who were in good schools and others. No, that's only for the labor and not for us. What are you doing to transform this particular aspect of this in terms of what you've done in the NEP and ensure that as we get to 12th standard, we have adequate skills? Or would you say, let's stop at 8th, 9th, let's move them into vocational? What would be the solution to this huge 50% that misses the higher education that you talked about?
No, first of all, I would say that working with hands is important because it builds up coordination between the mind and the hand. And it has its own inherent issues. Whether you work with your hand or not, the fact is that hand must be aligned with the mind. That is for everyone. But for a large number of children who need to work, you do have to develop competency in it. And I think in India, the problem is industry is looking for skilled manpower. And there are people who are looking for jobs. And I think the reason why the two of them are not coming together is because of the fact that we do not have the necessary competencies, the kind of skill the industry needs. So this skilling which we need to do in our schools and in our higher education ecosystem, it has to be aligned with the needs of the industry. The large ecosystem of startups. What kind of competencies you would want? You see, there are a lot of companies nowadays where I find that they would go and they would recruit students from class 12th onwards. And they would train them for the kind of competencies they require. Can we not anticipate and do that for them? Because it will also lessen the cost of the economy. So industrial needs the kind of skilling I do in schools. These must get aligned, and this is what the most important part is.
But what's preventing us from that? We have this fabulous policy that's there, and yet we continue in some senses not to emphasize what you're saying.
I guess there are some cultural and social issues also with respect to working with hands. That also needs to go away. That needs to go away, and I think dignity of labor, and there should be a concept that working with hands is cool. But also I feel that the markets will have to come forward for it. Ultimately, if you get paid for something well, then I think the rest of the things, they fall in place. So if you want to make skilling aspirational, then skilling should also pay you well. And it'll pay you well provided you have the necessary requisite skill, which is of a very high quality.
Is there a way the government can, for instance, what you're saying, using your hands, in 10th, in 9th, whichever class is appropriate in the higher secondary, actually start having these courses and move a lot of people away from moving into degrees? There again, we can discuss the structural fact that sometimes school education is costlier than a degree. right? It's cheaper to go to a government college and get a degree, and therefore a whole lot of people end up doing degrees that are, we call the old joke of bekar, BAKars, that has happened. So how do we, can we, in school level itself, introduce a whole range of courses that become immediately employable, and how do we go about doing that?
I mean, I would agree with you. You see, not everyone needs to go to higher education. People who have an aptitude for research, people who have aptitude for, creating technology, being more innovative, they should go into higher education. And that is where the quality would come in. But not everyone needs to go into higher education, because people need to go into the workforce, work with hands, and this is happening in the best of the countries which are very affluent. And I see no reason why we should not do it.
Why can't it be a matter of policy for the government of India, that is, since it's part of the NEP, that schools need to demonstrate that they have these vocational courses, and we will move out only that many people into higher education, these many people. So the really highly qualified will get in, the rest will move into vocation. What's stopping us from doing that?
No, I think that is already happening. That is already happening, but perhaps I would say that we need to accelerate and we need to do it a little quickly. You see, we've also brought in concepts like Atal Tinkering Labs. So last year, the Honorable FM mentioned in the budget that we would be setting up 50,000 Atal Tinkering Labs. And this year, if you may have heard the budget announcement, 15,000 of these AVGC labs are also going to come in our schools. Basically, the idea is to make our children think in a very innovative manner, work with hands, see what can be done. And Atal Tinkering Labs are going to be a very good platform where children can learn to be innovative, see what they can do with hands and the kind of equipment which is available, use artificial intelligence in it. So I look at it as a great opportunity. And these children, as and when they pass out of class 12th, they would be having several ideas as to what to do with that kind of a skill which they have developed.
Okay, I'm not going to press you more on the skill. We could have had the whole session on this. But let's get to the other aspect that you talked about, which is teacher empowerment. Really moving towards, and this morning we had Professor Dinesh Singh, who talked of how a teacher now should be a mentor, not just the teacher in the conventional way that we know about it. We have a whole list of schemes for teacher empowerment, enhancing the teacher. How successful have these schemes have been, and do you see a change that needs to be brought about, especially since now you've got AI into the picture? What needs to be done to bring our teaching the teachers program better?
You know, the whole concept of classroom transaction has changed. When we went to school, our teachers provided us information. But today, information is readily available. The student might have more information than the teacher has. The teacher's job is to make sure that that information which is there with the child, how does the child look at that information and interpret how knowledge is going to come out of that. And perhaps if you start looking at knowledge, then eventually it leads to the kind of wisdom you might derive from having that kind of a knowledge. So the job of the teacher inherently has changed. It requires much greater competency, and it requires much greater engagement with the children. I think it's becoming a more and more specialized job, especially with the advent and introduction of technology. So teachers' competency, in fact, is one of the major things which the National Education Policy 2020 talks about. We've come out with the National Professional Standards for Teachers. Right. So we are going to measure the competencies of each of our teachers into 3 categories and help them climb from 1 to 2 to 3. Also provide them mentors, because all of us require some kind of a mentoring to be able to do well in life. So I think, as I mentioned, in the next 5 years, I would say that our primary focus in the school education system would be to strengthen the secondary education system, create more capacity there, bring in more integrated schools, concentrate on the teachers, build up their competencies, tell them what the new pedagogical tools are, help them use it better. And at the risk of repeating myself and again, I would still say that give our children competencies in something so as to enable them to move into the labor force and do well there.
Okay, I'm coming back to one of the things that you mentioned earlier, which is foundational literacy and numeracy, or FLN as the technical term is for it. And you said this is non-negotiable in the NEP. Are we on track to achieve this grade level reading and numeracy nationwide? What are our timelines slipping quietly, or what is the assessment from your side on this one? Because you said very important that early foundational learning was key to what is going to happen in the future.
I would say that if I were to look at in a time series manner, I have done well.
Okay.
Nipun Bharat Mission has been a success, primarily because of two things. A, I think we've done the messaging well.
Mm-hmm.
So down the line, everyone knows what Nipun Bharat Mission wants to do. I think there has also been incremental additional funding for that. So that has also helped. This time, as I mentioned...
Can just sum up Nipun Bharat to someone who's not on the teaching side, but, you know, what does it do?
Nipun Bharat Mission basically is implementation of foundational literacy and numeracy. You want to do it in a mission mode because you think it has to be done well in a time-bound manner. If I were to share the learning outcomes of Nipun Bharat Mission for classes 3, it is 64 for language and 60 for maths. It is much better than what we have had in the past, but if you were to look at it from the other side, 36 children still don't have it, and 40 don't have it in numeracy. This is the challenge. How high can I take that? And I do hope that as and when the NAS 2027, Rashtriya Sarvekshan takes place in 2027, I get to see a substantial rise from 64 and 60.
Okay, hopefully. But let's keep this, the other aspect of it, which is the NEP also talked of a national curriculum framework, which you talked about, said let's have it uniformly across the country. We shouldn't have variations that are happening in all these subjects. And also to move away from classrooms of rote learning as we knew it in the past. How much of that, when you assess this particular aspect of this, is it visible in classrooms? Has that changed substantially? What is the progress you've made in the last 3-4 years of that?
It's happening. But see, you can't make a complete transformation overnight. But if you look at the central CBSE examinations, every year the percentage of questions which are based on experiential learning and analytical thinking, that is going up steadily.
Okay.
The other state school boards are also doing it.
So this memory-based learning and evaluation is on its way out. Would you say that? Or it's still there, but it's a slow transition?
To be able to write something without understanding, that is a difficult part. Mm-hmm. And that should go away. I often say that memorizing everything is not bad in itself, because that is also a power of the mind. So you should be able to remember something, but with understanding. And the more you understand, the more you relate to the world you live in, and the more you understand nature. That's the basis of science.
Final question. We got 3 minutes. You mentioned there are close to 2 crore students across the country. Am I right? That's the figure? Per class. Okay. So what is the total number you have?
I have 25 crore children in school.
All right. And total schools would be about 1.4 million? What's the number that you have?
14.7 lakhs.
So that's about 1.4 million. If you take a look at boy versus girl ratios in schools, at one time there was a great disadvantage for girl students. Has that changed? 1. 2, there seems to be at a senior level, boys actually dropping out more than girls do. Is that a cause for worry? Or what's the trends that you're noticing on this?
I'm glad that you asked this question. I think over the years, the presence of girls has increased. The gender parity index at all levels is more than 1. So that's a good part of it. If you look at every year when the board examinations come out in classes 10 and 12th, the girls are always outperforming the boys in results and in the outcomes both. I think the representation of girls in STEM in higher education also is at an all-time high. I think 43% of the students who are doing STEM in the country in higher education, they are girls. But there's a reverse phenomena which is taking place. If you look at the dropout rates for girls and boys, it has dropped all across, but at a secondary level, I am finding that the boys' dropout is more than the girls.
And is it urban, rural? What is the phenomenon in this?
It's everywhere, I would say. And I think it is also suggesting that a lot of boys are dropping out of 14 age because many of them are going into the workforce because they need to earn a little money. So again, this is something which is being addressed because we need to reach out to each of these children who are out of school because of whatever reasons they may be out. So what we are planning to, and we are working on is ask the open schooling system, the NEOS, to reach out to these children who are out of school, maybe working, but they can join NEOS and still complete their classes 10 and classes 12. So open schools need to be promoted, I would say, with a lot of interest. And if you were to ask me, I would say also done a little aggressively. And we are working on that.
Very good. I have just one point that you made. Since you have such a high dropout rate that's happening among boys, and we talked of skilling in vocational education, why can't that be an inflection point where you take all of them, they're anyway going and working, actually skill them, catch them at that point and do that? What's preventing us from doing that?
No, I don't think so. Anything is preventing us. As I mentioned that if I were to reach them out through the NEOS is very good at providing skills.
Okay.
So while you are working, you can hone your skill by taking up a skill which NEOS is providing it to you.
Right.
So skilling is important, and I think part of the reason why you're in the workforce is because you have some kind of a skill, but that skill can be made better and it can be honed to perfection.
Well, Sanjay Kumar, thank you very, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the Union and School Education and Literacy Secretary. Let's really, really give him a warm round of applause for the succinctness in which he spoke. Thank you so much.
It's such a pleasure being here with you, Raji, and be here with the audience. Thank you so much.